tend to be more cheerful, better able to handle stress, and tackle heavy workloads, compared to those who sleep on the right side of the bed.
Intelligence for your life on the John Tesh Radio Show. Don't miss this stuff.
Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA.
Ocala.
Diamonds in the sunset, now your time has come.
All right, 5 minutes after 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. One of the things I've often wondered about when you hear about history and you realize in the grand scheme of things how young the United States of America actually is. And I've often thought, okay, so these kingdoms were up all over the world, and you had these few renegades who decided to cross the ocean and to live into this wilderness, right? And to deal with the natives that were living here. And of course, we weren't fair to those natives. But I often thought, what did the rest of the world think about this place that we call home? Because I wasn't around back then. I've never known America as anything but what they call a superpower. But back then, it must have just been like a campground. I mean, the rest of the world must look at it as like a campground.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, and we're going to learn a lot about this right now, but all of a sudden, something happened and we became like a major player, and we have remained a major player ever since.
Yeah.
In so many ways, and in so many of the inventions that we take for granted. Even the development of plastic happened here. The automobile, the air conditioner, which is one I'm appreciating. Of course, everybody else in the country probably doesn't care. But anyway, it's just an amazing thing of what happened here. And William Seale is going to help us understand this. He has written a very well-written book. It is called The Imperial Season, America's Capital in the Time of the First Ambassadors. And while I'm referring to the United States, obviously this is a book about Washington, D.C., but that's the head, that's the heart, right, of America. That's where the decisions are made. And without those decisions, we wouldn't have what we have. And so let's find out about this. The Imperial Season, America's Capital in the Time of the First Ambassadors, 1893 through 1918. And William gave me a tip. He said, ask me what an ambassador is. So I don't know that if I were to answer that, I might get it wrong. So I'll let him do the answering. William Seale. Good morning, William.
Good morning, Larry.
And you're in Texas, you said, right?
I'm in Texas right now, and relatively warm.
Okay, so you're appreciating the air conditioner too right now, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we went from winter to summer like in one day.
Yeah, it was quick.
Yeah, we did. But thank you for being on the air with us. You have a list of credentials, very impressive. What is White House History? Is that a magazine?
It's a journal, and it's a popular type journal about the White House. The White House Historical Association, which was founded in the Kennedy administration, studies White House history, and that's what this magazine is. What the research that we do comes out of that in a popular 2 times a year journal, color journal, on different subjects.
Do you know, it's interesting. I've been to the White House one time, I believe, in my life, and I was a tourist. I wasn't invited, but I was just a tourist like everybody else. But it's you appreciate it more when you know the history. And so in listening to you say that, I kind of want to go back. I want to learn more because I don't know much about it really, And I mean, I know the history we've all learned, but I think I'd like to learn more. It's kind of always the way it is. You appreciate something more when you know a little bit about the history. And so how is the Imperial Season a book that's been bubbling within you for a while now that you just wanted to make sure you got this information out there?
Yes, it was a time of major change, the beginning of our time, really. And I use the ambassadors symbolically because we weren't given an ambassador by another country until 1893, and officially the West was one in 1890. We had been preoccupied, as you suggested earlier, we've been preoccupied with the continent. I mean, we're the innovators, the go-getters. They paid no attention to us in Europe at all. And then all of a sudden Europe, which is steaming for a war, begins to realize this is the greatest natural resource on earth. The Emperor of Kaiser Wilhelm in Germany proposed that the powers come take the United States and use it as a reserve of power, of resources and products in this very period. And so the first ambassador was sent in 93, and the importance of it is he wasn't a minister or a minister plenipotentiary. He was an ambassador. An ambassador is the highest rank in diplomacy, and it means that this individual is a representative of his country, and he can deal directly with the head of state. So all these kings in Europe, that were all the thrones in Europe, our ambassador could deal with, and just as their ambassador could deal directly with the president.
And it was probably necessary because in our day we can imagine phones and texting and everything, but that was it. I mean, the only way you could communicate is with another human being, right?
Absolutely. And in this period, of course, the telephone and the international communication were beginning to appear and beginning to enter into diplomacy. So it was to be eventually, instant communication like today.
So how did our relationship with the other countries, how was it affected by the ambassadors?
The ambassadors were part of the machinery of our crossing the ocean. After the Spanish-American War in 1898, when we had the Philippines, we had other possessions and the Pacific, we were termed an international power. Our imperialism had taken us beyond our boundaries. So we began to move toward the big table with the big shots in Europe, the diplomatic table. And, of course, the period I deal with was a euphoria. It was wonderful being a national power without having to prove it. But when World War I came, we had to prove it.
Yeah.
And sent all these people over there. And so that's the story is bookended by the ambassador coming and the end of World War I, when we really had to prove we were an imperial power.
Was that Joe Kennedy Sr.'s time in 1918?
No, later.
Oh, okay.
He was in the 30s. He was flourishing in that time, but he had not really come into his own as he not yet had the leisure to get involved in big things.
So are the ambassadors of today as influential as the ambassadors of the day we're talking about?
Probably a little less and a little more institutionalized. We had a different situation. In Europe, you're trained from young manhood. There were no women then doing this. You are trained. You walked up. It didn't matter what your royal title was or anything else. You went up the ladder, and you could get knocked off at any rung. In this country, the ambassador, so your ambassadors were trained foreign service people. In this country, the ambassadors were rich people, and the job was usually a reward. Now, that's not to say they were dilettantes or anything. These were very, very smart men, and we sent some brilliant people abroad, but we didn't have a trained diplomatic service like they had in the countries of Europe.
Was it all political, or were part of the arts involved in this also?
Not the arts, unless the ambassador, like John Hay, his wife had a big interest in that sort of thing. Unless that, it played no part at all. That really is rather late. That's within the last 50 years that the arts become of interest to the ambassadors, our ambassadors abroad.
And was the ambassador as a liaison mostly with Europe, or did we have ambassadors with Asian countries or South America or any place?
Everywhere. All the South American countries, finally, as it began to emerge. And we never had ambassador that was quite a job. So most of our people were still ministers, but by the 20s we have ambassadors, and we had an ambassador to China, Japan. All over the world, these people were being placed representing the country.
So let's be a fly on the wall, if you could help us understand this. Let's be a fly on the wall in the White House with the president, whoever the president may be, and there's a decision that needs to be made, and there's an ambassador influencing that decision. Did I just paint a picture that you could kind of elaborate on?
Well, the ambassador would usually go with the Secretary of State, but he would call it the State Department and then go to the White House. In 1909, they met in the Oval Office. Before that, it was in the White House upstairs. And they would meet and discuss these things. Theodore Roosevelt was very, very free and innovative, and he, for example, called in with the conflict between Russia and Japan. He called in the French ambassador to help him make his decisions about that. His Secretary of State was dying, and he needed this help, and that was very unusual, because in the peace for the Spanish-American War, the ambassador who was asked to intervene was not allowed in the room until the treaty was written.
Oh, wow.
And so it was. It depends on the president a lot. Woodrow Wilson went to Versailles, the meeting, the conclusion of World War I, to the horror of ambassadors everywhere. They couldn't believe a head of state was sent to negotiate treaties, but he did.
Oh, really?
When people were doing these negotiations, was it in a comfortable, relaxed atmosphere? Like, were they doing it over dinner or a luncheon, or were they very pristine and proper and just did it, in an office without any food?
Yeah, rather pristine and proper. And the typical meeting place in Theodore Roosevelt's time was what we call today the treaty room upstairs at the White House. It's now President Obama's private office, where home office, I guess you would say, where he spends some time. And they would meet, and then usually it would be followed by lunch or something like that. But it's pretty stiff. Maybe less, probably less so today, for sure. No, they would wear cutaway coats and formal dress, and which, by the way, they changed at noon to another formal suit.
Oh, my.
Really?
And, yes, they said they were representing their nations, their countries, and that was, nothing was to slip. As
an historian, did you find any discrepancies while you were doing your research for the book?
Discrepancies in people that did exceptional things.
Right.
They weren't according to the rules.
Right.
Well, what I mentioned about Roosevelt and Jusserand, the French ambassador, was unheard of. To make decisions for the nation, to be advised by the foreign ambassador, that was not anything that had happened.
Nowadays, you hear a lot of talk about like corporations influencing the government, and what do they call the people going to do that?
Lobbyists.
Lobbyists, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so was that an element back then?
Oh, yes, always. The ambassador, in a sense, represented big business often in Europe, pulling people together, arranging meetings for people. Now there, Robin, you have your dinners, you have your formal dinner parties, and this guy is invited, and the seating chart is worked out with great care that this person will be next to this person's wife who has influence over her husband,
really?
et cetera, et cetera. And they're working out business deals. I mean, the imperialism was a spilling over of business into other areas. It wasn't really altruistic at all. And so the ambassadors were very much involved in business and very much pressured.
Oh, really?
Being often usually very, very rich people, they were considered somewhat impervious to that.
So
they could say no.
So
wow.
we as people, as Americans, suspect, I don't know that we know this for a fact, but we suspect that some of the wars that we've been involved in were business deals. At the expense of the everyday person or soldier who went and died. Is there any truth to that then and now?
Well, in a sense, there's truth to it, but it gets beyond that. I wouldn't say directly anyone was responsible. Barbara Tuchman wrote a wonderful book called The Arms of Krupp, the great manufacturers of weapons and things, about the World War I. But I wouldn't say directly that way, but it's certainly part of the picture. The wars are very profitable.
Because of technology now, and people are becoming very outspoken. The politicians, they will jump the gun sometimes, call other politicians names to drive home a point. Do you think that the people that are representing the U.S. government in the ambassador roles, as well as the everybody from the president on down, are falling short of diplomacy?
No, I really don't, because I think our system is far more professional than it was in a strange way. The State Department is a huge operation, and it's very well managed. And it's passed on from whoever's secretary, it's passed on from one to the other. I think we're pretty safe in that department, and I think that one of the difficult parts of it is transparency, because if you're a negotiator, you don't put everything on the table at once, and yet the world looks on. But I think the State Department handles that well. It's a network. The embassies and the ambassadors, and then their foreign offices, as they call them in Europe, they're a network all over the world, and I think a lot of good comes from it. I sometimes think we don't use them enough.
You know, one thing I found fascinating of the photography that you've included in the book is the building of the Lincoln Memorial. I've been there several times, and there's a hill. Everybody who's ever been there knows it's on a hill. But that hill is artificial, isn't it?
It's an artificial hill. The basement was built flat on the ground, and the thing sticks up in the air, the colonnade thing,
Yeah.
and then they heap the dirt up around it.
And was there a reason for doing it that way?
Well, yes, because that's all fill land. I tell that in the front part of the book, where the tidal basin and all this in Washington was swamp.
Oh, I
see.
see.
It was
Okay.
fill land, not finished until the time of this book. And of course, originally they wanted to put the World's Fair on it, but Chicago won the fair, and so they began the City Beautiful movement to make Washington like the capitals of Europe, which had been a building all through the 19th century. The great capitals of Vienna and all had been building monumental buildings, and part of that had to do with embassies and the foreign people that came in to represent their country. And so there was an effort to make Washington look like that. And everything your listeners know, when they go to Washington, they expect to see. Most of it came, except for the Capitol, most of it came in the period I wrote about, the great buildings.
Wow, I guess I just that's why this is so fascinating. The book is called The Imperial Season, America's Capital in the Time of the First Ambassadors, 1893 through 1918. William Seale did the research and wrote this wonderful book. And William, we do this show live, which means listeners often will call to ask questions or comment. Did you want to take a phone call?
Sure.
All right, let's see if I can hook you up. Good morning. Thank you for being patient. You're on the air with William Seale.
Good morning.
Thank you. This is really a privilege. Our guest mentioned that the United States started to be taken seriously by the other powers in the 1890s. I'm a history buff myself, and it seems like the great powers, particularly in Europe, they treated us like an equal when it was convenient for them. For example, our guest mentioned Roosevelt and the negotiations to end the Russo-Japanese War, but both of those countries desperately wanted peace, and Teddy Roosevelt stepped forward to negotiate the Treaty of Portsmouth because he wanted to do that, but also the other powers wanted us to intervene. But I can think of a dozen other times when the United States and our interests were simply brushed aside by the great powers. And I'll hang up and listen, but I wondered if our guest could comment on that. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Well, you're absolutely correct. And the seminal thing about the Russo-Japanese treaty at Portsmouth was that America had often been an arbitrator in little things or smaller things when needed. But to be pulled into this was really major. But it is true that the country, we were largely ignored in many things, like the Pan-American effort we made was not successful. Europe loomed over everything until World War I, our participation in World War I.
Oh, really? And so part of me wonders if at least some people preferred it that way, that they kind of left us alone and even looked down on us. Why would we care? Just stay out of our...
That's a good point, because the American people, after World War I, were so down on any idea of internationalism that, Woodrow Wilson met immediate defeat when he came back from Europe, the Versailles, and the American people didn't want it. I maintain that in the period I write about, the quarter century, the public didn't really absorb all of this. They didn't know what was happening, because they still thought in insular terms, yeah.
So if Europe looked down on us, and then World War I happened, after the war, what was it about the experience of the soldiers? I'm guessing. I'm speaking reluctantly here because I could be supposing something that isn't even accurate. But there was a large immigration move after World War I from people in Europe coming here. So if they looked down on us, why were they coming over?
Good question.
Well, they were starving. I mean, in Germany and these countries were absolutely starving. The war had devastated them, and Versailles even crippled them more. And when a case can be made for World War II coming out of World War I, it was only 20-something years later.
Yeah.
Immigration is so interesting because so many people came to this country in the 90s and after that to make money and go back home and set up with a shop or a farm. Many people. That didn't happen as much after World War I. And people came here to stay because there was nothing to go back to. And there's a big difference there in the two waves of immigration. And of course, we've always had waves of immigration. You know, we had huge population of Germans here when the war started.
Right. Mm-hmm. Do you think the readers of the book? Let me ask you it this way: do you think the book itself will elevate the consciousness, at least of those interested, people who are interested in history, of the ambassadors themselves that you refer to? Will they become, because I think the names are even names I had never even heard of.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. They've been kind of lost. I found out about so many of them from memoirs they wrote that I got for $1 on Abe Books or something like that.
Wow.
I mean, that's my. I look at these books in this room right now, shelves of them that didn't cost anything. They've never sold much. Some are published on cheap paper. Nobody was interested. But it's a very, very virile and transitional period in this country, more seen and visible in Washington than anywhere else.
And were all of these ambassadors on the same plane monetarily, or were there some that didn't have as much money?
No, most of them had a lot of money because it cost a lot of money then, as it does today, to be an ambassador. Part of an ambassador's work is what Teddy Roosevelt called the plush life, and it was entertaining. They have to entertain, bring people together, as I was mentioning the dinner table earlier. Mm-hmm. So they have staffs and all. Now, John Hay, our second ambassador to England, his wife was an immensely rich woman from Ohio, and she was able to go over there, hire staff, and do a house over and all that stuff. But that's the thing; it costs a lot of money. When Mrs. Harriman went to France, now the State Department took care of most of that. She was a widow, and she took a maid or an aide and some paintings and things like that, but not much else. It was all sort of done for her. But it's still very expensive to be an ambassador.
So they didn't earn money as an ambassador?
Oh, they got a salary, but it didn't mean much.
Okay. So therefore, the reason to be an ambassador, was it self-serving in any way, or was it absolutely altruistic to serve the country? What was the real reason to be an ambassador?
I would say, on the balance, there was more altruism in it than anything. Some didn't know what they were getting into. One of my favorites is Mr. Meyer from Boston, who was a immensely self-made millionaire. He went to Russia, and boy, he got a bloodbath. And right in the middle of the difficulties there as the empire was declining, and he did a superb job. He was smart anyway, and he knew how to go in there and tangle with those people, with these tough diplomats and politicians and nobility. And so I think there are ambassadors as we study this subject, and I urge students to get interested in it. It's we see the developed men, and there weren't women then, of course, or now, but these people develop in office. The best comes out of them. I don't know, but I don't know how many one would say went over there just to associate with his lords and ladies. Now, Washington was full of people who came to Washington to do that, but not many ambassadors. Most of them were patriotic people that thought they could do some good, but they were usually political and pointy.
So maybe even more of a reason why we should know their names.
Yes, we should know more about them.
William, thank you. You've educated us a lot in just 25 minutes, and the book, of course, will do a lot more. I'd like to give away the copy that William sent us. It is called The Imperial Season. If you want it, it's a nice hardcover book. It'll be waiting here for you. I'll put your name on it if you call me. William Seale is who you'll look up on the normal book vendors. Seale, by the way. William spells his last name with an E. Do you have a website, William?
Yes, WilliamSeale.com.
It's easy enough. And the book, am I right?
The book, though, is all on the web. It's the different things. Just Imperial Season or my name will get it.
Okay, in the Imperial Season. William, thank you for being on the air with us today, and definitely come back next time you have another book.
I'd love to. Thanks, Larry and Robin.
All right, good stuff. We'll take a little break, and we'll be right back.
This is Wendy and Will of Dex Imaging. By now, you might be tired of hearing us talk about Dex. So instead of us telling you how much Dex can save you on your copier costs and how we can help your office be more efficient, we thought we'd let Judy tell you.
Hi, I'm Judy, the office manager of Graper Facial Institute here in Gainesville. We operate 8 medical offices, so I was looking for a document management system that would copy, scan, print, and share documents among all of our locations, but something that was within our budget. Dex Imaging recommended a Kyocera with their Index solution. It's been amazing. This machine does everything we need it to, including a direct scan into our current electronic medical record software. Dex even trained us on how to use it. Dex has been a tremendous help in making our practice and my job more efficient.
Thanks, Judy. And remember, call Dex Imaging today for a free workflow analysis to find out how you can save 20 to 30% on your copying and document management needs, just like Graper Facial Institute. Dex Imaging, 352-224-1816. That's 224-1816.
Hi, Robin. You look tired.
I am. I've been running all over town.
Why? Why not drive?
I need to get this stupid document notarized.
Oh, that's easy. You need personal service.
Duh. That's what I've been looking for.
You need to go see Mark at the Personal Service Center. He can notarize that for you, make copies, fax it wherever, or send it out in the mail. Heck, he can even scan it and email it for you.
Really? Where is he at?
2375 Northeast 25th Avenue, on the corner of Northeast 25th Avenue and 24th Street. You can call him at 789-6683.
Personal Service Center. Thanks, Larry.
Hi, Danny Warfel here. You don't have to sacrifice convenience for local personal service.
At Florida Credit Union, you can transfer your high credit card balances to our rewards card and actually get paid with cash back. You'll enjoy low rates and a customizable card that fits your lifestyle for free.
Never tried a credit union? Maybe it's time for a new game plan.
The Florida Credit Union Wave Card, connecting your money to your life.
Howdy, RL here to tell you about a great deal at Dairy Queen. For only $4.49, you can warm up to a hot, juicy combo of either a foot-long, quarter-pound all-beef chili dog or a tasty home-style cheeseburger, smoking hot off the char grill. Both get fries and a drink. You can add a sundae for only 99 cents. Now that's a doggone good deal at Dairy Queen, Silver Springs, where they always treat you like kings and queens.
This is a public notice. Local residents can now save thousands of dollars on their next car, truck, or SUV. It's not a tent sale, because no tent is big enough to hold this many cars. It's OcalaForSale.com. Say goodbye to sticker shock. OcalaForSale.com has thousands of vehicles with no stickers at all. But hurry, don't walk, don't run. Just sit down and log on to OcalaForSale.com. Prices and inventory change daily. Offer does not include dealer upcharge, undercutting, rust-proofing, factory surcharge, or delivery fee. See website for details.
Hi, I'm Yvette, and I'm here to tell you a few things about ABC Frederick's Appliance. They sell not only new, but used guaranteed appliances. When you call ABC Frederick's Appliance, they will provide service on what they sell and any appliances